The morning sun peeked through the tall windows of Westbrook Academy, casting long rectangles of light across the polished wooden floors. The hallways were quiet, with only the occasional sound of a locker closing or distant footsteps echoing against the walls. For 11-year-old Mei Lin, these empty moments before the rush of students arrived were both a blessing and a reminder of how out of place she felt. Mei adjusted the straps of her backpack, feeling the weight of her textbooks against her shoulders. She had been at Westbrook for 3 weeks now, but the grandness of the school still took her breath away. The building itself looked like something from a movie about rich people, all brick and ivy on the outside, gleaming wood and brass on the inside. Standing by her locker, Mei glanced down at her clothes. A simple blue sweater her grandmother had bought on sale and jeans that were a little too short at the ankles. Around her, even the emptiness seemed to whisper that she didn't belong. In a few minutes, the hallways would fill with students wearing designer clothes who spoke about summer homes and overseas trips like they were talking about going to the grocery store. Mei had come to Westbrook on scholarship after her parents had moved to the city for work. Back in her small town, she had been just another kid. Here, everything from her accent to her second-hand clothes marked her as different. "Just blend in," her mother had told her on the first day, smoothing Mei's straight black hair with nervous hands. "Study hard and make us proud." Mei tried, but blending in wasn't as easy as her mother made it sound. During lunch, she would sit alone, pretending to be busy with homework while stealing glances at groups of laughing students who never seemed to notice her. In class, she would know the answers but keep her hand down, afraid her accent would give the other kids another reason to stare. Today, Mei had arrived extra early. Her father had an early shift at the hospital where he worked as a janitor, and he had dropped her off on his way. With almost an hour before her first class, Mei decided to explore parts of the school she hadn't seen yet. She wandered down a corridor she didn't recognize, her footsteps echoing in the silence. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. Curious, Mei peeked inside and caught her breath. It was a music room, but unlike any she had ever seen before. Back at her old school, the music room had been a small space with mismatched chairs, a few worn instruments, and an old upright piano that was always slightly out of tune. This room was different. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a space that looked like it belonged in a fancy concert hall. Wooden chairs were arranged in a perfect semicircle. String instruments rested in cases along one wall. Brass instruments gleamed from shelves, and in the corner stood something that made Mei's heart skip. A grand piano. Not just any grand piano. Even from the doorway, Mei could tell this was special. Its glossy black surface reflected the morning light, and it dominated the room like a sleeping giant. For a moment, Mei just stared. Then, almost without realizing, she was moving. She stepped into the room and approached the piano. Her grandmother had taught her to play on an old upright piano that sat in the corner of their living room back home. The piano had been her grandmother's prized possession, brought over when she immigrated decades ago. It was on that worn instrument, with keys that sometimes stuck and a slightly tinny sound, that Mei had learned to love music. "A piano is not just wood and strings," her grandmother would say in their native language. "It has a heart. When you play, you must play with your heart too." Standing before this magnificent instrument, Mei felt small. She reached out a tentative hand, then pulled back, afraid to touch something so perfect. What if someone came in? What if she wasn't allowed to be here? But the room remained quiet, and the piano seemed to be waiting. Gathering her courage, Mei placed her backpack carefully on the floor and sat on the bench. The seat was adjustable, unlike her grandmother's piano, and she was able to position herself perfectly. She raised her hands, letting them hover over the keys for a moment, then gently pressed down on a single note. The sound that filled the room was pure and rich, so different from what she was used to that it startled her. Mei played another note, then another. Each tone rang clear and true, filling the space with a warmth that made her forget her nervousness. Soon her fingers were dancing across the keys in a simple melody her grandmother had taught her, a folk song from the old country. As she played, Mei felt something inside her unlock. The worry about fitting in, about being the poor scholarship kid, about her too short jeans and her accent, all of it faded away. There was only the music, flowing from her fingers like water. She didn't notice when the first bell rang, signaling that students would soon be filling the hallways. Lost in the music, May began to play a more complex piece, Beethoven's Für Elise. Her grandmother had spent months helping her master it, patiently guiding her through the difficult sections until May could play it with her eyes closed. The sound of the door opening wider finally broke through her concentration. May's hands froze on the keys as she looked up to see a woman standing in the doorway. She wore a tailored blue dress and had her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her expression was unreadable as she regarded May. "I'm sorry," May stammered, quickly standing up. "I didn't mean to, I'll go now." The woman tilted her head slightly. "You play beautifully," she said simply. "Where did you learn?" May clutched the strap of her backpack tightly. "My grandmother taught me. I'm really sorry for using the piano without asking. I'm Ms. Chen, the music teacher." The woman stepped further into the room. "And you are?" "Mei Lin. I'm new here." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, waiting for a scolding. Instead, Ms. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Beethoven is not easy, especially on an unfamiliar instrument. Your technique is impressive for someone so young." Before May could respond, voices and footsteps sounded in the hallway. Students were arriving for the day. Panic flashed across May's face. Ms. Chen seemed to understand. "You should get to your class, but May," she added as the girl headed for the door. "The music room is open during lunch period. Students are welcome to practice then." May nodded quickly and slipped out, merging into the growing crowd of students in the hallway. Her heart was still racing, but alongside the fear of being caught was something else. A tiny spark of excitement. She could come back. She could play again. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. May sat through her classes taking notes and answering questions when called upon, but her mind kept wandering back to the music room and the magnificent piano. By the time lunch period arrived, her excitement had transformed into nervousness again. What if other students were there? What if they laughed at her for thinking she could play on such a fine instrument? Maybe it would be better to eat her lunch quickly and find a quiet corner of the library instead. As she stood in the cafeteria line with her tray, May overheard a group of girls talking nearby. "Orchestra practice is going to be brutal today," one girl said, flipping her long blonde hair over her shoulder. "Ms. Chen expects us to have that piece memorized already." "At least you only have to worry about the violin part," another girl replied. "Try playing the piano accompaniment. My fingers are going to fall off." The first girl rolled her eyes. "Nobody feels sorry for you, Lily. You've been playing since you were like 4. And your parents got you that crazy expensive tutor from Juilliard." May's eyes widened slightly as she listened. These were the music students, the ones who would be in the music room during lunch. Her shoulders slumped a little. Of course they would be there. Of course they would be talented. Of course they would have had expensive tutors and years of training. Still, something pulled at her. Ms. Chen had said students were welcome. Maybe she could just sit quietly and listen to them play. Maybe she could learn something. Decision made, May ate her lunch quickly, then made her way to the music room. As she approached, she could hear voices inside, laughing, chatting, the occasional burst of music as someone played a few notes on an instrument. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. About a dozen students were scattered around the room. Some held instruments, others were looking through sheet music, and a small group was gathered around the piano, where a tall girl with perfect posture was playing a complex piece with confidence. Nobody noticed May as she slipped inside and found a seat in the back corner. She watched in awe as the students practiced, their fingers moving with the ease that comes from years of training. The girl at the piano, Lily, she assumed, played with technical precision that made May both impressed and intimidated. When Lily finished her piece, she stood up from the piano bench and joined a group of friends, leaving the grand piano momentarily unattended. May's fingers itched to touch those keys again, to feel the joy she had experienced that morning, but she remained frozen in her seat. These students belonged here. She didn't. As the lunch period neared its end, students began packing up their instruments. May was about to slip out unnoticed when Ms. Chen entered the room. "Excellent work today, everyone," the teacher said. Then her eyes found May in the corner. "Ah, May, did you come to practice?" Suddenly, all eyes in the room turned to her. May felt her face grow hot as the students looked at her with curiosity and, from some, with barely disguised disdain. "Who's she?" one boy asked, not bothering to lower his voice. "A new student," Ms. Chen replied calmly, "and quite a talented pianist from what I heard this morning." Lily, the girl who had been playing the piano, looked May up and down, taking in her simple clothes and obvious discomfort. A small dismissive smile touched her lips. "Well," Ms. Chen continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension, "lunch period is almost over. You should all head to your next classes." As the students filed out, several of them glanced back at May with curious expressions. Lily lingered by the piano, her hand resting possessively on its gleaming surface as she watched May with cool assessment. Then she too left, her expensive shoes clicking on the wooden floor. When everyone had gone except for Ms. Chen and May, the teacher approached her. "You didn't play today," she observed. May shook her head. "They're all so good," she whispered. "They've probably been taking lessons forever." Ms. Chen considered this. "Many of them have had advantages, yes. But talent comes in many forms, and hard work often outshines privilege." She paused. "The music room is also open before school starts, when it's usually empty. Just in case you'd prefer to practice then." With that, she gave May a small nod and walked to her desk. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, and May hurried out to her next class. As she walked through the crowded hallway, May thought about what Ms. Chen had said. Maybe she would come early again tomorrow. Maybe in the quiet of the morning, she could find the courage to play again, to feel that connection to her grandmother and to the music they both loved. For the first time since arriving at Westbrook Academy, May felt a tiny spark of belonging. Not with the other students, perhaps, but with the music that had always been her true home. For the next week, May arrived at school an hour early every morning. The quiet music room became her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the feeling of not belonging that followed her through the rest of her school day. In those peaceful morning moments, with just the piano and the rising sun for company, May felt her confidence grow. She started with simple pieces, folk songs her grandmother had taught her, basic classical compositions she had memorized years ago. As her hands reacquainted themselves with the magnificent instrument, she gradually worked her way up to more challenging music. On Friday morning, May sat at the grand piano. Her eyes closed as her fingers danced through a piece she knew by heart, Mozart's Sonata in C major. The music filled the room, each note clear and perfect. She played with a freedom she couldn't find anywhere else in this intimidating school, letting the melody carry her back to her grandmother's living room, to the feeling of small hands being guided across worn keys. So lost was she in the music that she didn't hear the door open. She didn't notice the figure standing in the doorway, watching with widening eyes as her small fingers mastered the difficult runs and trills of Mozart's composition. It was only when she finished, the final notes hanging in the air like morning mist, that she heard a soft gasp. May's eyes flew open and she turned to find Lily, the girl who had played the piano during lunch period, staring at her from the doorway. Her face was a mixture of surprise and something else May couldn't quite identify. "That was," Lily began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. Her expression hardened slightly. "What are you doing here so early?" May's hands fell from the keys to her lap. "Ms. Chen said I could practice in the mornings," she said quietly, already reaching for her backpack. "I was just leaving." Lily stepped further into the room, her designer boots clicking against the wooden floor. "I didn't know anyone else came early to practice." She set her violin case on a nearby table. "I have an important recital coming up, so I need extra practice time." The unspoken message was clear. This was Lily's time, Lily's space, and May was intruding. May stood up, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. "Sorry, I'll go." "Wait." Lily's voice stopped her halfway to the door. "That piece you were playing, you played it differently than how it's usually taught." May turned back, uncertain. Was this a criticism? "My grandmother taught me. She said Mozart should sound like laughter, not like homework." A flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe interest, crossed Lily's face before she could mask it. "Your grandmother taught you? You don't have a private instructor?" No, May said simply. Just my grandmother. She played in an orchestra back home before she came here. Lily seemed about to say something else when the door opened again, and 3 more students walked in. 2 boys with instrument cases and another girl May recognized from her math class. They stopped when they saw May. Who's she? One of the boys asked Lily, not bothering to lower his voice. Lily shrugged. Some scholarship kid. She was playing the piano. The other girl looked May up and down, taking in her worn jeans and simple sweater. You play? She asked, her tone making it clear how unlikely she found this. Not really, May lied, her cheeks heating up. I was just trying it out. The Steinway isn't for trying out, one of the boys said with a laugh. That's a concert grant. It probably costs more than your house, his friends laughed. And even Lily's mouth twitched in amusement, though her eyes remained thoughtful as they stayed on May. I should go, May mumbled, edging toward the door. Yes, you should, the boy agreed. Some of us have actual music to practice. The spring concert is only 8 weeks away, and only the best students get to perform. May slipped out the door, their laughter following her into the hallway. She hurried to her locker, blinking back the hot tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks. What had she been thinking? That piano wasn't for kids like her. This school wasn't for kids like her. No matter how early she came, no matter how hard she tried to find her place, she would always be the outsider. The scholarship kid who didn't belong. For the rest of the day, May kept her head down. In class, she spoke only when called upon. At lunch, she ate quickly and spent the remaining time in the library with a book she wasn't really reading. She tried not to think about the piano or the music room or the look on Lily's face when she first heard May play. When the final bell rang, May gathered her things and headed toward the front entrance where her mother would be waiting to pick her up. As she passed the music room, she heard piano music, someone playing the same Mozart piece she had practiced that morning. She paused, listening. The playing was technically perfect, each note precisely where it should be, but somehow it sounded flat, like homework, not laughter. Without meaning to, May found herself pushing the door open slightly. Inside, Lily sat at the grand piano, her posture perfect. Her face concentrated as she played through the sonata. Ms. Chen stood nearby, listening with a critical ear. Your technique is flawless as always. Lily, Ms. Chen said when the piece ended, but I think you're missing the joy in Mozart. He wrote this when he was young. It should have more lightness. Lily's shoulders stiffened slightly. I played every note correctly. Music is more than correct notes, Ms. Chen replied gently. It's about feeling, about... She stopped, noticing the door was ajar. May, did you need something? May pushed the door open wider. No, I was just... I heard the music. I'm sorry for interrupting. Lily turned on the piano bench, her expression cool as she looked at May. Were you spying on me? No. I was just leaving and I heard... May has an interesting interpretation of this piece, Ms. Chen interrupted, giving May a thoughtful look. Perhaps she could demonstrate? Lily's eyebrows shot up. Her? But she's not even in the music program. Nevertheless, Ms. Chen said firmly, May, would you mind playing the first movement for us? The way your grandmother taught you? Every instinct told May to refuse, to run, to escape the scrutiny of Lily's dismissive gaze. But something in Ms. Chen's expression gave her pause, a quiet confidence as if the teacher already knew what May was capable of. Slowly, May set down her backpack and approached the piano. Lily reluctantly stood, making a show of giving up her spot at the instrument. As May sat down, she felt a moment of panic. What if she couldn't play well in front of them? What if her fingers froze or she hit wrong notes? She closed her eyes briefly, imagining her grandmother sitting beside her on the bench of their old upright piano. Music comes from here, her grandmother would say, placing a hand over her heart. Not just from your fingers. Taking a deep breath, May began to play. At first, her fingers felt stiff, awkward under the weight of being watched. But gradually, the music took over, and she forgot about Lily and Ms. Chen. She forgot about being the scholarship kid, the outsider. There was only Mozart's joyful melody, dancing through the room like sunlight. When she finished, the silence that followed seemed to vibrate with the lingering notes. May looked up to find Ms. Chen smiling and Lily staring at her with an expression that had transformed from skepticism to stunned surprise. That, Ms. Chen said quietly, is Mozart, as he should be played. Thank you, May. Lily said nothing, but her eyes stayed fixed on May with newfound awareness. The moment was broken by the buzz of May's phone, a text from her mother saying she was waiting outside. "I have to go," May said, standing quickly. As she grabbed her backpack and headed for the door, Ms. Chen called after her. "May, the music room is yours in the mornings. Keep practicing." May nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and hurried out. As the door closed behind her, she heard Lily ask Ms. Chen something in a low, urgent voice, but she couldn't make out the words. Outside, the spring afternoon was warm. Cherry blossoms drifting in the light breeze as May approached her mother's battered old car. For the first time since starting at Westbrook Academy, she felt a small bubble of something like hope in her chest. Ms. Chen had heard her play, really heard her, and had understood what May's grandmother had taught her about music coming from the heart. "How was school today?" her mother asked as May climbed into the passenger seat. May thought about the morning, about being discovered by Lily, about the laughter of the other students. She thought about playing Mozart for Ms. Chen, about the look of surprise on Lily's face. It was interesting, she said finally, watching the imposing brick building of Westbrook Academy recede in the side mirror as they pulled away. That night, after dinner, May sat at the small electric keyboard her parents had bought to replace her grandmother's piano, which had been too large to bring when they moved to the city. The keyboard wasn't the same, the keys felt lighter, the sound tinnier, but with her eyes closed, May could imagine the grand piano in the music room. She began to play a new piece, one she had been working on with her grandmother before the move, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was challenging, with its delicate ornamentations and emotional depth, but May loved the way it seemed to tell a story without words. As her fingers found their way through the complex melody, May thought about what had happened that afternoon. She had played for someone other than her grandmother and parents for the first time, and she hadn't fallen apart. Ms. Chen had appreciated her playing, had even used it to teach Lily something about music. Maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her at Westbrook after all, not with the popular kids or the wealthy students who looked through her as if she were invisible, but in the music room, with the magnificent piano that sang under her fingers like it had been waiting for her all along. With that thought warming her, May continued to play into the evening, the music filling the small apartment like hope. The weeks passed and May settled into a routine. Every morning she arrived early to practice in the music room, losing herself in the joy of playing the magnificent grand piano. Most days she had the room to herself, though occasionally Ms. Chen would slip in quietly to listen, offering gentle guidance when May struggled with a difficult passage. What surprised May most was that Lily had started arriving early too. The first few mornings after their encounter, Lily had simply sat with her violin, practicing in the far corner of the room while shooting curious glances at May. They didn't speak beyond brief nods of acknowledgement. It was an uneasy truce, but May was grateful for even that small acceptance. By the third week, something had shifted. One morning, as May worked through a challenging section of a Chopin piece, her fingers stumbling over a complex run of notes, Lily set down her violin and approached the piano. "You're rushing it," she said, her voice lacking its usual edge. "That's why you keep missing those notes." May's hands froze above the keys. She looked up at Lily, unsure how to respond to this unexpected advice. "Try again, but slower," Lily continued, demonstrating the tempo by tapping her finger lightly on the piano's glossy surface. "Like this." Hesitantly, May began again, following Lily's guidance. The passage flowed more smoothly, each note finding its proper place. "Better." Lily nodded. She paused, as if debating whether to say more. "My teacher says you have to master something slowly before you can play it quickly." "My grandmother says the same thing," May replied, surprised to find something they had in common. A flicker of a smile crossed Lily's face before she returned to her violin. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was something, a crack in the wall between them. That afternoon, as May packed up her books at the end of math class, a notice on the bulletin board caught her eye. In bold letters, it announced auditions for the spring concert, Westbrook Academy's most prestigious music event of the year. Students would perform for parents, faculty, alumni, and even talent scouts from prestigious music programs across the country. May stared at the notice, a wild thought taking root in her mind. What if she auditioned? The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Students who performed at the spring concert were the best of the best. Kids who had been training with private tutors since they could walk, who competed in international competitions, who were destined for places like Juilliard and the Royal Conservatory. "You're not seriously thinking of auditioning, are you?" May turned to find Lily's friend Zoe looking at her with amusement. A small group of music students had gathered behind her, including the boys who had laughed at May in the music room. I was just reading it," May stammered, her cheeks growing hot. "The spring concert isn't like school assemblies at whatever public school you came from," one of the boys said. "Only real musicians make the cut." "Right," another chimed in. "My brother auditioned 3 years in a row before he got in, and he'd been playing since he was 4. Zoe laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Can you imagine? The scholarship kid thinking she could play at the spring concert?" Their laughter followed May down the hallway as she hurried away, her earlier confidence crumbling with each step. They were right. What had she been thinking? The spring concert wasn't for students like her. That evening, May sat at her keyboard at home, trying to lose herself in the music as she usually did, but the mocking voices kept intruding on her thoughts. Her mother noticed her distraction during dinner. "Is something wrong at school?" she asked in their native language, her forehead creasing with concern. May shook her head, not wanting to worry her parents. They worked so hard to give her this opportunity at Westbrook. Her father often took double shifts at the hospital, and her mother had started cleaning houses on top of her regular job at the grocery store. They believed Westbrook would open doors for May's future, doors that had remained closed to them. "Just tired?" May answered, forcing a smile. "Lots of homework." Later, as she practiced a particularly difficult piece, her father paused in the doorway of her small bedroom. "Your grandmother called today," he said. "She asked about your piano playing." May's hand stilled on the keyboard. "What did you tell her?" "That you practice every day, just like she taught you." He sat on the edge of her bed. "She said to remind you about the story of the bamboo." May smiled, remembering the tale her grandmother had told her many times. How bamboo might bend in the strongest winds, but it rarely breaks because it knows how to be both strong and flexible. "She also said," her father continued, "that when you're ready, you should play the song she gave you before we left." May nodded, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. Before moving to the city, her grandmother had given her the sheet music for a piece she had composed herself. A beautiful, complex composition that blended classical techniques with melodies from their homeland. It was the most difficult piece May had ever attempted, and she had been working on small sections of it in secret during her morning practices. "I'm not ready yet," she whispered. Her father squeezed her shoulder gently. "Your grandmother says the music knows when you're ready, even if you don't." The next morning, May arrived at school earlier than usual, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. The music building was silent as she made her way to the familiar room, the first golden rays of sunrise streaming through the tall windows. She was surprised to find the door already open, a soft light spilling into the hallway. Peering inside, she saw Ms. Chen at her desk, reviewing sheet music with a cup of tea beside her. The teacher looked up with a smile. "You're early today, May." "I wanted extra practice time," May explained, setting her backpack down. "The concert auditions are next week." Ms. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Are you planning to audition?" May opened her mouth to say no, to explain that students like her didn't perform at the spring concert, but something stopped her. The memory of her grandmother's story about the bamboo, perhaps, or the quiet confidence in her father's eyes when he delivered her grandmother's message. "I don't know," she said honestly. "The other students don't think I should." Ms. Chen set down her pen and gave May her full attention. "And what do you think?" "I think—" May hesitated, gathering her courage. "I think I love playing, and I think my grandmother would want me to try even if I don't get in." A warm smile spread across Ms. Chen's face. "Then it seems you have your answer." She gestured toward the piano. "What will you play for your audition?" May took a deep breath. "My grandmother's composition. She wrote it herself, blending classical with traditional music from our homeland." "That sounds perfect," Ms. Chen nodded. "May I hear it?" Heart pounding, May sat at the piano and pulled the carefully protected sheet music from her folder. She had never played the entire piece through, had only worked on sections of it when she felt brave enough to attempt its complexities. She positioned her fingers above the keys and began. The opening was gentle, like dawn breaking over mountains, then built in intensity as the melody wove traditional pentatonic scales into a classical framework. It told the story of her grandmother's journey from their homeland to America, of loss and hope, of finding beauty in a new place while carrying the old place in your heart. As May played, her initial nervousness faded. The music flowed through her, challenging her technically but also speaking to something deep within her soul. When she reached a particularly difficult passage, her fingers faltered momentarily, but she remembered the bamboo, bending but not breaking, and found her way back to the rhythm. When the final notes faded, May realized her cheeks were wet with tears. She had connected with her grandmother's music in a way she never had before, understanding now what the older woman had meant about music, knowing when you're ready. Ms. Chen was silent for a long moment, her own eyes glistening. "That," she said finally, her voice slightly husky, "is what music should be. Technical skill serving emotion, not the other way around. But I made mistakes," May pointed out, wiping her cheeks. "Yes," Ms. Chen agreed, "and you'll work on those before the audition. But May, what you have cannot be taught. The technique can be improved, but the heart behind your playing, that is a rare gift." The door opened then, and Lily entered, violin case in hand. She stopped when she saw May at the piano, tear tracks still visible on her face. "Sorry," she said, looking between May and Ms. Chen. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "Not at all," Ms. Chen replied. "May was just practicing for her concert audition. Perhaps you could offer some feedback. Your technical ear is excellent." Surprise flickered across Lily's face. "You're auditioning?" May nodded, suddenly feeling bold. "Yes, with my grandmother's composition." Lily seemed about to say something dismissive, but then she glanced at the sheet music still open on the piano, and curiosity won out. "I've never seen that piece before." "Who published it?" "Nobody," May explained. "My grandmother wrote it herself. It tells the story of her journey from our homeland to America." Something shifted in Lily's expression, respect perhaps, or simply a new understanding. "Can I hear it?" And so May played again, this time for both Ms. Chen and Lily. When she finished, Lily was quiet for a long moment. "Your left hand rushed in the middle section," she said finally, "and you need more control in the fortissimo passages." She paused, meeting May's eyes directly. "But it's beautiful, different from anything in the standard repertoire." Coming from Lily, this was high praise indeed. "Perhaps," Ms. Chen suggested, "you two could work together before the audition." Lily's technical precision would complement May's emotional depth. "You both might learn something." The two girls looked at each other, years of different backgrounds and expectations stretching between them. Then Lily gave a small nod. "I could help with the technical sections," she offered. "If you want." "I'd like that," May replied, a tentative smile forming. As the first bell rang and other students began to arrive for morning practice, May gathered her music with newfound determination. The spring concert auditions no longer seemed like an impossible dream, but a challenge to face. Like the bamboo, bending toward the sun without breaking. Whether she was accepted or not, she would play her grandmother's music with all her heart, and somehow that seemed like victory enough. The day of the auditions arrived with a sky full of spring rain. May stood at her bedroom window, watching water stream down the glass as she tried to calm her racing heart. In just a few hours, she would play her grandmother's composition for the audition panel. 3 music teachers from Westbrook, including Ms. Chen and a guest judge from the City Symphony. For the past week, May had practiced harder than ever before. Every morning before school, she and Lily had worked together in the music room, Lily offering technical suggestions while May showed her how to find the emotion behind the notes. It wasn't exactly friendship, but it was a partnership born of mutual respect for music, if nothing else. "May, breakfast is ready," her mother called from the kitchen. May turned from the window with a small sigh. Her stomach was too knotted for food. But she knew her mother had woken up early to make her favorite breakfast, congee with century egg and pork, a comfort food from their homeland that they usually saved for special occasions. In the kitchen, her parents exchanged worried glances as May barely touched her food. "You should eat," her father said gently. "Musicians need energy." "I'm just nervous," May admitted, forcing herself to take another spoonful. "What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes?" Her mother sat down beside her, taking May's hand in hers. Your grandmother called last night after you went to bed. She said to tell you that the music is already inside you. Your fingers just need to let it out." Tears pricked at May's eyes. How she wished her grandmother could be there today, sitting in the audience with her calm smile and unwavering belief in May's talent. "I miss her," May whispered. "She misses you too," her mother replied, squeezing her hand. "But she is very proud of you for auditioning." "We all are." Her father checked his watch. "We should go soon." "You wanted extra time to warm up, yes?" May nodded, gathering her courage along with her sheet music. Whatever happened today, she would play with all her heart, for herself, for her family, and for the grandmother whose music had become her voice in this new place. The auditorium at Westbrook Academy was smaller than the main performance hall, but to May it felt enormous as she stepped inside. A grand piano sat on the stage, its black surface gleaming under the lights. In the first few rows of seats, students waited their turn to audition, instrument cases at their feet and nervous energy in their postures. May spotted Lily near the front, reviewing her sheet music with intense concentration. When Lily looked up and saw May, she gave a small nod, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of their shared purpose today. "Ah, May, you're here." Ms. Chen approached, clipboard in hand. "You'll be auditioning after the first violin group. About 40 minutes from now. Would you like to warm up in one of the practice rooms?" May nodded, grateful for the opportunity to collect herself away from the watching eyes of the other students. As Ms. Chen led her to a small room with an upright piano, they passed Zoe and her friends huddled together, whispering. They fell silent as May walked by, but she caught fragments of their conversation. "Scholarship kid," and "waste of the judge's time." May's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high, remembering the bamboo in her grandmother's story. The practice room was small but quiet, a sanctuary where May could gather her thoughts. "Take your time," Ms. Chen said. "Someone will come get you when it's your turn." Left alone, May sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys without pressing them. She closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother beside her, hearing her voice. Music is the language of the heart. When words fail, music speaks. Slowly, May began to play. Not her audition piece, but a simple melody her grandmother had taught her when she was just 5 years old. The familiar notes centered her, calming her racing thoughts. By the time she transitioned to scales and then sections of her grandmother's composition, her hands were steady and her mind clear. A knock at the door startled her. One of the junior music teachers poked his head in. "They're ready for you, May." Heart pounding again, May gathered her sheet music and followed him back to the auditorium. As they entered, she saw that more people had arrived, not just the students auditioning, but others who had come to watch. Near the back, she was surprised to see her parents, who must have returned after dropping her off. Her mother gave a small wave, her father a thumbs up. The judges sat at a table near the front, Ms. Chen, 2 other music teachers May recognized from the halls, and an elegant woman in a black suit who must be from the City Symphony. Their faces were neutral, professional, revealing nothing of their expectations. As May walked toward the stage, she heard whispers ripple through the audience. Most of these students had never heard her play. To them, she was just the quiet scholarship kid who kept to herself. Zoe and her friends watched with smirks, clearly expecting her to fail. Climbing the steps to the stage, May approached the piano with reverence. This wasn't the one she practiced on each morning. This was the school's finest instrument reserved for performances. She adjusted the bench, placed her music on the stand, and took a deep breath. "Whenever you're ready," the symphony judge said, her voice kind but formal. May closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then she began to play. The first notes of her grandmother's composition filled the auditorium, delicate as rain on leaves. May felt the familiar tug of the music drawing her in, making her forget the watching eyes and judging ears. As the piece built, incorporating melodies from her homeland with classical structure, May's fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence. She reached the difficult passage that had given her so much trouble in practice, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought she might falter. But then she heard Lily's voice in her memory. "Slow down here. Control the tempo," and Miss Chen's gentle guidance. "Let the music breathe." May navigated the complex runs with careful precision, then released into the emotional heart of the piece. This was the part that always made her think of her grandmother. The melody that spoke of leaving home but carrying it with you always, of finding beauty in new places while honoring the old. May played with all the love and longing in her heart, tears pricking at her eyes but her fingers never faltering. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. May sat motionless, hands still hovering over the keys, afraid to break the spell the music had cast. Then from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound growing until it filled the space that her music had just occupied. May looked up in surprise. Students were standing, applauding with genuine appreciation. Her parents beamed from the back row, her mother wiping away tears. Even Zoe and her friends looked stunned, their earlier smirks replaced by wide eyes and slightly open mouths. At the judges' table, Ms. Chen was smiling with quiet pride. The symphony judge was writing something rapidly on her notepad, pausing only to look up at May with newfound interest. As May stood to bow, she caught Lily's eye in the audience. The girl who had once looked at her with dismissive superiority now nodded with unmistakable respect, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Walking off the stage on shaky legs, May was immediately surrounded by students she barely knew, all asking the same questions. Who composed that piece? Where did you learn to play like that? How long have you been playing? Before she could answer, the junior music teacher called for quiet. Next audition, please. We need to continue. The crowd around May reluctantly dispersed, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. As she made her way back to her seat, students who had never spoken to her before smiled or nodded in acknowledgement. A door had opened, and through it, May caught a glimpse of a place where she might belong after all. When all the auditions were finished, Ms. Chen stood to address the students. Thank you all for your performances today. The judges will deliberate, and the final list for the spring concert will be posted tomorrow morning outside the music office. As people began to file out, May was caught in a whirlwind of congratulations and questions. The symphony judge stopped her briefly, handing her a business card. Your technique needs refinement, she said directly, but your musicality is extraordinary. Call my office if you're interested in discussing scholarship opportunities for the Youth Symphony Summer Program. Stunned, May took the card with trembling fingers. A scholarship to the city's prestigious summer program? It seemed impossible. Her parents waited by the door, faces glowing with pride. That was beautiful, May, her mother whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. Your grandmother's music, her father added, his voice thick with emotion. You played it as if she were here with you. As they turned to leave, Lily approached, violin case in hand. The two girls looked at each other for a moment, the distance between their worlds suddenly seeming smaller. You played well? Lily said finally. Your grandmother's composition is... It's special. Thank you, May replied, for helping me with the technical parts. I wouldn't have made it through the middle section without your advice. Lily shrugged, but her usual coolness had softened. Maybe we could practice together sometimes. Not just for auditions. Before May could respond, Zoe appeared at Lily's elbow. Are you coming? We're going to get coffee and wait for the results. Zoe glanced at May, then back at Lily. There was still distance in her eyes, but the outright disdain had faded. I guess you can come too, she said to May, the invitation reluctant but real. May looked at her parents, who smiled encouragingly. Go, her mother said. We'll pick you up later. As May walked out with Lily and the others, she felt something shift inside her, like a flower turning toward unexpected light. She didn't know if she'd made it into the spring concert. She didn't know if these tentative connections would blossom into real friendships. But for the first time since arriving at Westbrook, she walked with her head high, no longer feeling like an outsider looking in. The music had spoken for her when words couldn't, revealing the truth her grandmother had always known, that some languages need no translation, and some gifts transcend all barriers. The morning after the auditions, May arrived at school early as usual. But this time she wasn't alone. A small crowd of students had gathered outside the music office, waiting for the spring concert list to be posted. May hung back, her stomach fluttering with a mix of hope and fear. Aren't you going to check? Lily appeared beside her, nodding toward the bulletin board where Ms. Chen was pinning up a sheet of paper. May shook her head. I'll wait until everyone else has looked. The crowd surged forward as soon as Ms. Chen stepped away. Excited voices called out names, followed by cheers or disappointed sighs. May watched from a distance, trying to read the expressions on people's faces rather than pushing her way through. Lily disappeared into the crowd, returning moments later with a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Congratulations," she said simply. "I made it?" May whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "Not only did you make it," Lily replied, "you're playing the closing piece solo." The closing solo was the most prestigious spot in the entire concert, reserved for the student who had most impressed the judges. May felt her knees go weak and she grabbed the wall for support. "That's not possible," she protested. "There are so many talented students. Students who've been training for years with the best teachers." "Students like me, you mean?" Lily interrupted. But there was no bitterness in her voice, only a kind of wry acceptance. "I've had private lessons since I was 4. My parents have spent thousands on the best teachers. And you know what? The judges were right. Your performance yesterday had something mine didn't." Before May could respond, Zoe appeared with a group of friends. Their expressions ranged from stunned disbelief to reluctant respect as they looked at May. "So scholarship kid gets the closing spot," Zoe said, her tone hard to read. "Guess you weren't just trying out the piano that day after all." May stood straighter, finding her voice. "My name is May, not scholarship kid." Zoe held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough, May." She glanced at Lily. "We're meeting after school to start planning the group pieces. Ms. Chen wants all string and piano students in practice room A at 3. With that, she walked away, her friends following. "That's practically an olive branch. Coming from Zoe," Lily commented. "You impressed them all yesterday. Not just the judges." The warning bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until first period. As students scattered toward their classrooms, May finally approached the bulletin board. There it was in black and white. Closing solo performance May Lin, original composition. Seeing it written down made it real in a way that Lily's words hadn't. May traced her name with a trembling finger, thinking of how proud her grandmother would be. She had to call her tonight with the news. "Quite an accomplishment," Ms. Chen said, appearing beside her. "In my 15 years teaching here, we've never had a student perform an original composition as the closing piece." "I didn't write it," May reminded her. "My grandmother did. And yet you bring it to life in a way that makes it your own," Ms. Chen replied. "The judges were unanimous in their decision, especially after the symphony representative spoke so highly of your musicality." She glanced at her watch. "You should get to class, but come see me during lunch. We need to discuss the rehearsal schedule for the next 3 weeks." The day passed in a blur. In classes where May had once been nearly invisible, students now glanced at her with new interest. A few even congratulated her in the hallways. It was a strange feeling being seen after so many weeks of blending into the background. At lunch, instead of eating alone in the library as usual, May found herself invited to sit with Lily and a few other music students. The conversation flowed around her, talk of rehearsals, past concerts, the pressure of performing, and for the first time, May felt like she could contribute, like she belonged in this world of serious young musicians. After school, her parents were waiting in their old car, eager to hear the news. "I made it," May told them, unable to keep the smile from her face as she climbed into the back seat. "They gave me the closing solo." Her mother turned around, eyes wide. "The closing solo? With your grandmother's music?" May nodded, and her father let out a whoop of joy so loud that students in the parking lot turned to stare. May should have been embarrassed, but instead she found herself laughing with pure happiness. "We must call your grandmother right away," her mother insisted. "She will be so proud." That evening, they gathered around the phone in their small kitchen, taking turns sharing the news. When it was May's turn to speak, her grandmother's voice came through warm despite the distance. "I knew you would find your place, little one," she said in their native language. "Music speaks when words cannot." "I wish you could be here for the concert," May told her. There was a pause before her grandmother replied, "Perhaps I will be closer than you think." Before May could ask what she meant, her mother took the phone, changing the subject to practical matters of concert preparations. Later, when May questioned her parents about the cryptic comment, they just smiled and said that her grandmother was probably speaking figuratively.